Have you ever felt like everything was going perfectly with a guy, and then out of nowhere he pulls back? One minute he's calling you every day, talking about the future, making you feel seen, and the next he's cold, distant, or suddenly not ready. What if I told you that wasn't random? What if I told you that almost every man, consciously or subconsciously, gives a woman a silent test before he decides whether or not to commit? It's not a game, it's not manipulation, it's psychology. And if you don't understand it, you might keep failing it without ever realizing why. In today's video, we're breaking down the test that determines everything, the way a man figures out if you're someone to casually date or someone he sees a future with. This test shows up in subtle ways in how you respond to certain situations, how you carry yourself, how you handle the gray areas. And here's the twist. It's not about being prettier, smarter, or more chill. It's about whether you show up as someone who understands his emotional blueprint, someone who makes him feel safe, challenged, respected, and seen. This isn't about changing yourself to please a man. It's about recognizing the moment when he's watching not your words, but your energy. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what this test looks like, and more importantly, how to pass it without trying too hard or losing yourself. Let's dive in. It doesn't always happen with words. In fact, most of the time, the moment a man starts testing you isn't something he announces. It's subtle, quiet, and often disguised as normal behavior. But it's there. And if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it. This moment usually comes right after he starts feeling something real. You've had a few amazing dates, the chemistry is flowing, you've opened up emotionally, maybe even physically. He's into it, and he feels that, but here's what most people don't talk about. The moment a man feels connection, especially a deeper one, is often the same moment his subconscious kicks in and goes, wait, is this safe for me? Not safe in the physical sense, safe in the emotional one. And so, without even realizing he's doing it, he begins to test, not by setting traps, but by observing, very carefully, how you react to uncertainty, how you handle emotional discomfort, and whether you start seeking validation the second things feel unclear. This could show up in a few ways. He might become a little less responsive to texts. He might delay plans, or show up a bit emotionally distant compared to before. It's not always because he's losing interest. It's often because he's watching. Watching what you do when you're unsure about where you stand. Because in that moment, he's asking himself a silent question. Can she hold her own? Or is she going to collapse into needing something from me just to feel okay? This is where a lot of women, even high-value, confident ones, start to shift. The doubt creeps in. Maybe you start overanalyzing texts, changing your tone to be more pleasing, asking questions to check in on where he stands. It feels innocent, even justified. But to a man in testing mode, it often reads as neediness or insecurity. And this is crucial. The test is not about perfection. It's not about being cold or pretending not to care. It's about emotional regulation, about showing that your sense of peace and identity isn't dependent on how quickly he texts back, how much reassurance he gives, or whether he's 100% consistent every day. He's watching for stability, not performance. Because here's the thing, most men don't consciously know they're doing this. It's not always a strategic test. It's an emotional reflex. Just like some women test men to see if they're serious, protective, or grounded. Men test to see if you're emotionally secure enough to be close to, without losing yourself. And once that test begins, what he sees in your reactions tells him everything. Can I trust her with my vulnerability? Can she be steady when I'm not? Is she showing up as a partner, or looking for someone to complete her? That moment, the silent one, is where everything starts to shift. Not just for him, but for how the relationship will unfold. You don't need to pass the test perfectly. You just need to know that it's happening. And that how you respond to the silence often says more than anything you could ever say out loud. It's easy to assume that if a man is emotionally available, he won't ever pull back. That once he opens up, once he starts being consistent, expressive, or vulnerable, he's locked in for good. But here's the truth that catches a lot of people off guard. Even the most emotionally available men, the good, grounded, serious ones, still pull back sometimes. And it's not always because of fear, games, or loss of interest. The reality is that emotional availability doesn't mean emotional perfection. Being emotionally open doesn't cancel out a man's need to protect his space, regulate his feelings, or step back to process what he's experiencing, especially when that experience is intimacy deepening faster than he expected. Here's what's important to understand. When a man begins to feel a strong emotional connection, it activates something internal. For healthy men, this isn't necessarily a red flag, it's just a signal that something real is forming. And real love, no matter how beautiful, can feel overwhelming at first, especially for a man who spent most of his life taught to suppress, manage, or compartmentalize his emotions. So when he pulls back, it's often less about you and more about him trying to recalibrate. He might be trying to check in with himself. Does this feel like the right time? Am I emotionally ready for this level of vulnerability? Is this the type of relationship I want to invest in long term? For a man who's self-aware and emotionally grounded, this pause is actually healthy. It gives him space to make a conscious choice, not just slide into a relationship out of momentum or expectation. But here's where things often go wrong. The second he pulls back, even slightly, the woman panics. She assumes the worst. She shifts her energy. She starts proving, chasing, or asking questions that are really just seeking reassurance. And what could have been a short, necessary pause becomes a complete shift in dynamic. Suddenly, the man no longer feels the emotional safety he needs to move forward. Not because the woman did anything wrong, but because her response signaled that she wasn't as emotionally secure as he hoped. See, emotional availability doesn't mean he'll always be on. It means he's capable of connection and self-awareness. And sometimes that awareness tells him to slow down, step back, and make sure the foundation is right. The question is, can you hold your center while he does that? This is the test beneath the test. Not whether you can keep him from pulling back, but whether you can stay emotionally solid when he does. If you meet his pause with calm curiosity and confidence, he sees something rare, someone who isn't just available for love, but also emotionally resilient enough to navigate the natural ebb and flow of intimacy. And that is the kind of presence that makes a man come back with clarity, not confusion. Sometimes the most powerful part of this dynamic is that you might already be passing the test without even realizing it. If you're naturally in alignment with your own worth, boundaries, and emotional balance, then the way you show up is already sending a clear message to him. Not one of pressure or insecurity, but of quiet confidence. And that speaks louder than anything you could ever say. One of the clearest signs you're passing the test is how you react when things don't go exactly how you hoped. Maybe he goes a little quiet for a day. Maybe he says something that feels vague about where things are headed. But instead of spiraling or demanding answers, you pause, reflect, and respond calmly. You don't jump into fixing or proving mode. You don't shift your entire emotional state based on his temporary distance. That inner stability, that's rare. And men notice it instantly, even if they don't fully understand why it affects them the way it does. Another sign is that you're not overly focused on what he's thinking. You're focused on how you feel in his presence. You're observing too. You're asking yourself, does this connection feel mutual? Am I respected here? Does his behavior match his words? That kind of awareness naturally shifts the dynamic because it means you're not auditioning, you're evaluating. And when a man senses that you're not just waiting for his approval, but actively determining if he's aligned with your values, it triggers something deep in him, respect. You also tend to keep your life full and intact. You're not dropping everything to fit into his world. You're excited about your own passions, your friends, your time, and that energy is magnetic. It tells him that while you're interested, you're not desperate. You value connection, but you don't need it to feel whole. That's not detachment, it's maturity. And most emotionally healthy men are deeply drawn to it, even if they've never consciously articulated why. You might also be setting boundaries effortlessly, without making it a big deal. You say no when something doesn't feel right. You speak up calmly when something feels off. And you do it without drama, manipulation, or threats. Just truth. That level of emotional intelligence shows him you're not someone who tolerates confusion or mixed signals. And ironically, it often makes him want to show up better because you're modeling how adults navigate connection. And finally, you're present. You're not overly in your head, trying to control outcomes or read between every line. You're allowing the relationship to unfold while staying rooted in who you are. That calm presence becomes an emotional safe space, not just for him but for you too. So if you're doing any of this, even in small ways, you're passing the test. And not because you're playing a role, but because you've done the work to trust yourself first. That's what changes everything. Most women don't fail this test because they're not good enough, not attractive enough, or not doing the right things. They fail it accidentally because they start over-functioning the moment they feel emotionally unsafe. And often they don't even realize it's happening until it's too late. It usually begins with a small shift. Maybe he becomes slightly less responsive. Maybe his tone changes, or the effort dips. Suddenly a woman who was calm and confident a week ago finds herself analyzing texts, replaying conversations, and wondering if she said something wrong. That anxiety turns into action, checking in more, asking questions like, "Are we okay?" or adjusting her behavior to keep his attention. It's subtle, but it's a signal, and it's often misread. When a man sees this, especially early in a relationship, what he feels is that she's reacting to him rather than staying grounded in herself. It creates the sense that her emotional stability is dependent on his behavior, and that's heavy. Even if he likes her, he might start feeling boxed in or pressured, because he's no longer engaging from a place of mutual curiosity. He's now managing her emotional responses. Another common way women fail this test is by abandoning their standards the moment they feel something intense. Maybe he says he's not ready for a relationship, and instead of holding her boundary, she shifts into convincing mode. Maybe if I'm just patient, maybe if I give him space, he'll come around. And before she knows it, she's in a situationship, hoping his actions will eventually match his potential. But here's the truth. The moment you trade clarity for chemistry, you've stepped out of alignment with yourself. And men pick up on that, especially emotionally available men. Because the woman who holds her standards, even when she really wants him, is the woman who communicates value without having to say a word. Some women also fail the test by performing instead of being. They try to be the cool girl, the low maintenance, go with the flow type, because they think that's what keeps a man interested. But the problem is that's not sustainable. Eventually your real needs, emotions, and expectations surface, and when they do, he's confused. The woman he connected with wasn't fully real. She was managing a version of herself to avoid rejection. Failing this test isn't about flaws. It's about fear. Fear of loss, fear of not being enough, fear of being alone. And when fear is driving your actions, connection gets replaced with control. That's what men feel, even when they can't explain it. But here's the good news. This isn't a pass or fail exam. You can course correct the moment you notice what's happening. The key is to pause and ask, am I moving from love or from lack? Because when a woman stays anchored in herself, especially when the energy shifts, she communicates something far more powerful than words. I want connection, but I won't betray myself to keep it. That's how you stop failing the test and start changing the game entirely. When a man says he's not ready to commit, most women take it at face value or internalize it as something they're doing wrong. But more often than not, the real reason he won't commit yet has less to do with you and more to do with his own inner alignment. And the frustrating part, he might not even fully understand it himself. Commitment isn't just about deciding to be with someone. For men, especially emotionally available, intentional men, it's a reflection of their readiness to be known, be responsible, and be seen. And that kind of vulnerability isn't light or casual. It requires a level of emotional clarity that not every man has reached, even if he seems mature and stable on the surface. So when he pulls back or hesitates to define things, it's not always because you're lacking something. In many cases, it's because he hasn't resolved something within himself yet. It could be past heartbreak, fear of failure, unfinished goals, or even just an unclear vision of the future. Men don't always verbalize this, but it lives in their energy, and it shows up as hesitation, indecision, or emotional distance. Another layer to this is pressure. Sometimes, even when a man is deeply into you, he senses that you're more ready than he is, and that difference in timing creates tension. He knows you're looking for something serious, and while he might want that too eventually, he doesn't want to feel pushed into a decision before his heart and mind are fully aligned. The irony, that pause isn't always rejection. It's often a sign of respect, a desire to not enter something he can't show up for fully. Here's something most people miss. Men don't commit just because something feels good. They commit when it feels right. That includes timing, emotional space, self-identity, and trust. So if he's still holding back, it might not be about his feelings for you. It might be about whether he feels like the man he wants to be in a relationship. That gap between desire and readiness is real. And then there's this: some men delay commitment not out of fear, but because they're watching. They're observing how you handle this in-between space. They're trying to figure out, is she patient but grounded? Is she pushing for an outcome, or connected to the process? Can I be uncertain around her without her falling apart? These questions might not be conscious, but they shape his perception of you more than you think. So no, the real reason he won't commit yet isn't always about doubts about you. It's often about where he is on his own journey, and whether he feels safe to evolve alongside someone without losing his autonomy. What matters most is how you respond. When you stay connected to your standards without rushing the outcome, you become a mirror. And sometimes, seeing himself reflected in your grounded presence is exactly what helps him close the gap between almost and ready. When a man is truly ready to commit, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually, what makes a woman stand out to him isn't what most people think. It's not about physical appearance, how easygoing she is, or even how much they have in common on paper. Those things might grab his attention initially, but they're not what hold it. What truly stands out is presence. A woman who knows who she is, whether or not he chooses her. A woman who's not trying to convince him of her worth, because she already carries it like second skin. She doesn't perform. She doesn't chase. She doesn't need to fill silence with words. Her confidence isn't loud, it's felt. And that energy lingers in a man's mind long after the date ends, long after the text thread goes quiet, long after he scrolls through distractions. What stands out is emotional clarity. She's not confused about what she wants, and she doesn't pretend to be okay with less, just to keep him around. She expresses herself calmly, clearly, without guilt or emotional manipulation. She holds space for connection, but she doesn't abandon herself to keep the peace. That balance of openness and self-respect is rare, and it creates a feeling for him that's hard to describe, but impossible to ignore: safety. What also stands out is how she handles the gray. Most people are great when things are black or white, either fully on or fully off. But what makes her unforgettable is how she moves through uncertainty. She doesn't demand definition from a place of fear. She listens, watches, and responds, not to force a relationship, but to feel the truth of the dynamic. That level of emotional regulation signals something profound. This is someone I can build something real with. A woman who stands out doesn't just ask, does he want me? She also asks, do I feel seen, safe, and supported here? She's not afraid to walk away if the answer is no. And that's powerful, because when a man senses that she values her peace more than proximity to any one person, he recognizes she's not just in the market for attention. She's open to connection, but only the kind that matches her self-worth. Even in conversation, she stands out, not by dominating the space, but by being fully in it. She listens deeply. She responds with intention. She doesn't try to impress, but somehow she always leaves an impression. It's not because she's perfect, it's because she's real, present, honest, and willing to be seen as she is. That kind of woman doesn't just attract a man, she challenges him, not in a way that threatens his masculinity, but in a way that invites him to show up fully, because anything less just wouldn't match the level of energy she brings. That's what makes her stand out. Not just in his eyes, but in his soul. By now, you've probably realized something important. Commitment isn't something you chase. It's something that's invited through your energy, your alignment, and your boundaries. It doesn't happen because you say the perfect thing, play the perfect role, or avoid all mistakes. It happens when two people meet in truth, when both are grounded enough in themselves to build something real together. The test men give before committing isn't about tricking you or keeping you guessing. It's a reflection of something deeper, their desire to feel emotionally safe, respected, and free to choose love, not feel forced into it. And whether they're conscious of it or not, how you respond during the early stages, especially when things feel uncertain, says everything about the kind of relationship you're ready for. Creating a commitment-ready connection starts with you, with being deeply rooted in your self-worth, regardless of who's showing interest, with knowing that you are not here to earn love. You're here to receive it from someone who sees you clearly and chooses you without hesitation. That shift in energy changes everything. You don't need to be perfect. You don't need to hide your feelings or act like you don't care. But you do need to stay honest with yourself first. Ask, am I showing up as the version of me that I respect? Am I honoring my needs, my pace, my standards? Because when you hold your center, you create space for a man to rise and meet you there. And if he doesn't, that's not a loss. It's a redirect towards something better aligned. The kind of love you're looking for, the kind that lasts, isn't built on anxiety, mixed signals, or guessing games. It's built on trust, mutual effort, and shared vision. But before any of that can happen, you have to be the first one to commit to your standards, your peace, and the kind of love you're no longer willing to wait for passively. And once you do, the right man won't test you to see if you're good enough. He'll recognize that you already are.